We wouldn't be arguing about whether there were women and men if things didn't need to be retooled from the very bottom. That's my sense of the situation now.
That is a critical conversation. Whether the God-shaped hole gets filled by God exactly is something maybe for us to discuss on the shows.
You're going to be joining me for the next 9 evenings on my We Who Wrestle with God tour, and I would like you to come armed with your sharpest sword and hold nothing back.
You've asked me to do something, generally speaking, I'm pretty good at, which is to be disagreeable and try to find holes in things. I'm going to be coming at it from a kind of first principles, uneducated, but I hope sufficiently intelligent perspective.
And I think you could offer to the audience a really critical response that's thoughtful, so that I can see if there's still holes in what I've laid out, because I can't find any. That's what we're going to explore.
I can't wait.
The difference between the temperature 200 years ago and the temperature now, and you going to this 1.5 degrees and the Earth is going to burn up or whatever, that's less than between breakfast and lunch. It is so stupidly ridiculous to say that a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in global atmospheric temperature is going to be a disaster. As a matter of fact, it will open up vast areas of farmland that were too cold before.
Hello, everyone. I have the opportunity today to talk to Dr. Patrick Moore. I'd been following Dr. Moore for quite a long time, and I had the privilege of hearing him live in a little meeting on Vancouver Island here recently, and we decided to do a podcast together. Dr. Moore is in the interesting position of being skeptical, to say the least, and unconvinced of the doomsaying prognostications of the climate apocalypse mongers, but also have been active in the environmentalist movement for 50 years. He was one of the founding members of Greenpeace back when they were working primarily on anti-nuclear campaigns and on campaigns to protect the remaining whales in the tragedy of the Commons oceans against overfishing. Dr. Moore became convinced that the environmentalist organizations as such were in the process of being taken over by actors whose primary interest was not the green movement in the environmental sense or the peace that Greenpeace once stood for, but more the promotion of a kind of radical self-interest combined with the hysterical doom-mongering that's now typical of the apocalypse promoters. And so we go through the evidence of climate change and environmental composition over about a 500 million year period, concentrating particularly on the last 2 million years, and present the hypothetically appropriate conclusions in that climate denialism festival. So join us. Well, hello, Dr. Moore. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me and to everybody else on this platform today. We met recently in Vancouver Island. It was the first time I'd heard you speak publicly, and I was very interested in the story you walked through. And so I thought today we could start with your adventures, your early adventures with Greenpeace and what you were hoping for from that environmentalist organization, and move from that to your divergences with their current worldview, let's say, and the reason that divergence was necessary and right. So let's start with Greenpeace. Let's begin with that.
Well, Jordan, I was doing my PhD in ecology at the University of British Columbia. I had excelled in the life sciences all through high school and in my undergraduate years, mainly interested in evolutionary biology, photosynthesis, ecology in general. And I was radicalized by the Vietnam War, the threat of all-out nuclear war, and the concern for the environment, which was a new thing. The word ecology had not yet been used in the popular press. It was an obscure scientific term. And I think I was the first PhD ecologist to graduate in in Canada. As far I don't know of any others. And so I learned through a little piece in the newspaper that a small group of people were beginning to meet in the basement of the Unitarian Church, which is a church that accepts all religions. And not that I'm particularly religious, but I agree with that sort of thing of peace and an end to warring and all of that sort of thing. I'm a pacifist, I guess you could say. But I'm also fantastically interested in nature and the evolution of life from no life to life. I think there's two things that we can probably be sure we will never know the answer to. One of them is, how did life begin? And the other one, is there anyone else in this universe besides us? It hasn't become apparent to date. And we've got all kinds of listening devices and we're a young star. The sun is a young star. So many of the stars that would have planets around them that are billions of years older than our star, you'd think if life was going to happen on them, it might have done so by now. So those are kind of my basic philosophies, where I think there are things that we can never know. Many of them, probably, maybe some that we don't even know how to speak about. But ecology, the science of how all living things are interrelated, not only with other living things, but also with the planet as a whole, and even the solar system, because Saturn has an effect on tides, and it has an effect on these cycles of glaciation and interglacial periods that have been going on for 2.6 million years during the Pleistocene Ice Age. So that's how I see the world, as everything being interconnected. And that brings me to, well, what is really the fundamental meaning of science and scientific discovery? Because science is about discovery primarily. And I have three steps that describe the scientific method. The first one being observation. And if you can't observe something either with your own senses or with the machines we've made, like X-ray machines and all the other things we have that we can see inside people, we can have radiation detectors and all that sort of thing. So they're part of our ability to observe what's going on in nature or in the world and in the outer world. So that's what's needed, is first observation, and then second comes verification, where you've observed something, and then you see if it repeats itself over and over again by very carefully trying to prevent outside forces from interfering with the two things you're looking at, where you think there might be a cause and an effect relationship. And that's mostly what science is about, is discovering cause effect. And so you do that yourself to make sure that when you tell other people what you think you've found, you'll be on solid ground. And then there is replication, where other people see if they can do what you did. And if they can, especially if it's 100% kind of thing, then you have a theory, a scientific theory. And the reason that most of the scare stories today are about things that are either invisible, like CO2, radiation, and the bad thing that's supposed to be in GMOs, which doesn't have a name. Everything has a name. So if it doesn't have a name, it doesn't exist. And that's my opinion on the subject, is there's nothing in GMOs that is harmful. Otherwise, it would probably harm people. And many people are eating them by the millions. So that's just a total hoax, as much as the climate emergency, or climate crisis, as they like to call it, is a total hoax, because people cannot see what carbon dioxide is doing. They cannot do the first thing in science, which is observation. And therefore, for some reason, the sort of mass hysteria effect takes place around many subjects. And so it's not just things that are invisible, though. It's also things that are so remote that no one hardly can go and look at it for themselves. And I use the two examples of polar bears and coral reefs. very opposite. One's in the hottest tropics, the other's in the coldest Arctic.